The crack of ice splitting beneath her skates was the first warning Mia Blackburn had that something was terribly wrong. One moment she was gliding effortlessly across the frozen lake, enjoying the crisp winter air filling her lungs, and the next she was plunging into freezing darkness. A scream caught in her throat as the icy water shocked her system. As the cold began to paralyze her limbs, strong hands suddenly gripped her coat, hauling her from the water's deadly grasp. Through water-blurred vision, she caught sight of her rescuer, a tall man with intense eyes and a determined expression that seemed vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place why. "Breathe," he commanded, his deep voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Just breathe, you're safe now." Mia gasped, coughing as air rushed back into her lungs. The winter sun seemed impossibly bright after those seconds in the dark water. As her vision cleared, she found herself looking up at Warren Iverson, whose face she'd seen countless times in business magazines and newspapers, the notoriously private shipping magnate whose fortune was rumored to be in the billions. "Mr. Iverson," she managed through chattering teeth. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, that she recognized him before he shrugged off his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "We need to get you warm," he said, ignoring her question as he helped her to her feet. "My cabin is just beyond those trees." "Can you walk?" Mia nodded, though her legs trembled beneath her. The ice had broken only at the edge of the lake where the water wasn't deep enough to be truly dangerous, but the December temperature of the water was threat enough. Warren's strong arm around her waist steadied her as they made their way toward a path that led from the lake through a stand of snow-laden pines. "I didn't know anyone else was out here," Mia said, her teeth still chattering. "This lake is usually deserted in winter." "I prefer it that way," Warren replied shortly, his gaze fixed ahead. "It's why I bought the property." Of course he owned the lake, Mia thought. Warren Iverson was known for buying up pristine wilderness, though whether for conservation or simply to keep others out was a matter of speculation. The press had dubbed him the Ice King, both for his shipping empire's dominance in the northern routes and for his famously cold demeanor in business dealings. "I'm sorry for trespassing," she managed, feeling suddenly embarrassed on top of everything else. Warren glanced down at her, and for a moment his stern expression softened. "There are no trespassing signs. I'm not that much of a monster." Before Mia could respond, a small log cabin came into view, smoke curling from its chimney. It wasn't what she'd expected from a billionaire, no sprawling mansion or architectural showcase. Just a modest, traditional cabin that looked like it had stood for generations. Warren guided her up the steps and through the door into a warm interior that smelled of wood smoke and coffee. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and the furnishings were simple but high-quality leather and wool and wood, nothing ostentatious. "The bathroom's through there," he said, pointing to a door. "There are towels and a robe. Get out of those wet clothes before you develop hypothermia." His tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Mia nodded gratefully and made her way to the bathroom, which was surprisingly modern compared to the rustic exterior of the cabin. Under different circumstances, she might have appreciated the heated floors and rainfall shower, but right now all she cared about was getting warm. She peeled off her sodden clothes, dried herself vigorously, and slipped into the plush robe hanging on the back of the door. It was clearly Warren's. The sleeves hung well past her hands, and she had to roll them up to free her fingers. There was something oddly intimate about being wrapped in his clothing, and Mia pushed the thought away as quickly as it came. When she emerged from the bathroom, Warren was in the small kitchen area, stirring something on the stove. He'd changed into a dry sweater, and his dark hair was slightly disheveled, making him look more human than the polished images she'd seen in the media. "Hot chocolate," he said without looking up. "Best remedy for a cold shock." Mia perched on one of the stools at the kitchen island, tucking her bare feet under her. "Thank you for everything. I can't believe I didn't check if the ice was thick enough." "It should have been," Warren said, sliding a steaming mug toward her. "But there's a warm spring on that side of the lake. Creates thin spots. I should have posted warnings." His admission of potential fault surprised her. From what she'd read about Warren Iverson, he wasn't a man who acknowledged mistakes. "I don't usually have visitors," he added, as if reading her thoughts. "I come here to get away from everything." Mia wrapped her hands around the warm mug, studying him. Up close, Warren Iverson wasn't quite what she expected. His features were sharp, high cheekbones, strong jaw, straight nose, but there was something in his eyes that the business photographs never captured, a kind of guarded weariness. "And I ruined your solitude by nearly drowning in your lake," Mia said, attempting a smile. The corner of Warren's mouth twitched slightly. "If you were going to interrupt my peace and quiet, at least you did it dramatically." Mia laughed, then winced as the movement caused her to realize just how sore she was from the fall and the cold. "You might have bruises tomorrow," Warren said, noticing her discomfort. "The ice isn't forgiving when it breaks." "Neither is the business world, from what I've heard," Mia replied before she could stop herself. "Sorry, that was presumptuous. I don't actually know anything about you beyond what I've read." Warren's expression closed off slightly. "And what exactly have you read, Miss?" "Blackburn." "Mia Blackburn," she supplied. "And nothing you probably haven't heard before. The Ice King of Northern Shipping, the billionaire who never gives interviews and eats rival companies for breakfast." "Lunch, actually," Warren said dryly. "I'm not much of a breakfast person." Mia stared at him for a moment before realizing he'd made a joke. A smile spread across her face. "Well, that's one fact the business journals got wrong." Warren leaned against the counter, studying her with those intense eyes. "What brings you out to a frozen lake in the middle of nowhere, Mia Blackburn?" "I'm a wildlife photographer," she explained. "I was hoping to catch some winter shots of the eagles that nest around here. I didn't realize this was private property." "Wildlife photographer," Warren repeated, and she couldn't tell if he was impressed or skeptical. "Do you work for a publication?" "Freelance," Mia said. "My work appears in nature magazines occasionally, and I sell prints through a gallery in the city." "It's not exactly billionaire territory, but it pays the bills and I get to be outdoors, which is what matters to me." Warren nodded, his expression unreadable. Outside, the winter afternoon was already beginning to darken, the short December day drawing to a close. "Your clothes won't be dry before nightfall," he said, glancing at the window. "And the road down the mountain will be treacherous after dark." "Oh." Mia hadn't considered that. "I can call for a ride or maybe a taxi from town." Warren shook his head. "No taxi will come up here in winter, and the cell service is spotty at best." He hesitated, looking almost uncomfortable. "You're welcome to stay the night. There's a guest room." Mia blinked in surprise. The last thing she'd expected was an invitation to stay in Warren Iverson's private retreat. Everything she'd read about him suggested he valued his privacy above all else. "I don't want to impose," she began, but Warren cut her off with a shake of his head. "It's not an imposition. It's practicality. I'm not sending you down a mountain road in the dark after you've already had one brush with hypothermia today." Put that way, it was hard to argue. "Thank you, that's very kind." Warren looked almost offended. "It's not kindness, it's common sense." But Mia wasn't fooled. Despite his gruff manner, there was consideration in his actions. He could have simply driven her to town himself if all he cared about was practicality. Instead, he was offering his home to a stranger. "I'll need to make a call," she said. "Let my sister know I won't be home tonight." Warren nodded toward a landline phone on the wall. "That works when the cell service doesn't." Mia padded over to the phone and dialed her sister's number. "Maddie, it's me. Listen, I won't be home tonight. No, everything's fine. Well, almost fine. I had a little accident at the lake, but I'm okay. No, really, I'm fine. I'm staying at a cabin nearby." She hesitated, not sure if Warren wanted his presence here known. "The roads are too dangerous after dark. Yes, I'm sure. I'll be home tomorrow. Love you too. Bye." She hung up and turned to find Warren watching her with an unreadable expression. "Thank you for not mentioning me," he said quietly. "Most people would be eager to drop my name." Mia shrugged. "It's not my place to tell people where you spend your time." She hesitated, then added, "Besides, my sister would probably drive up here herself if she knew I was with the famous Warren Iverson, accident or no accident." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Famous or infamous? Depends on who you ask, I suppose," Mia replied honestly. Warren seemed to appreciate her candor. He gestured toward the living area where comfortable sofas faced the fireplace. "Make yourself at home. I'll prepare something for dinner." Mia settled on the sofa, drawing her legs up beneath her. The robe was warm and soft against her skin, and the fire cast a golden glow over the cabin's interior. From her vantage point, she could watch Warren move efficiently around the kitchen, his movements precise and economical as he prepared their meal. For someone with his wealth and power, he seemed remarkably self-sufficient. No staff, no assistants, not even the typical luxuries one might expect. Just a man in a cabin in the woods, cooking dinner as if he did it every day. Perhaps he did. The Warren Iverson in this cabin was a far cry from the ruthless businessman depicted in the financial press. That man was reportedly cold, calculating, and utterly devoted to expanding his shipping empire at any cost. This man had pulled her from freezing water without hesitation, and was now making her dinner while she wore his robe. The contradiction was intriguing. As the evening progressed, Mia found herself increasingly comfortable in Warren's presence. Dinner was simple but delicious, a hearty stew that he admitted to having prepared the day before, crusty bread that he warmed in the oven, and a surprisingly good bottle of red wine. Their conversation flowed more easily than she would have expected. Warren asked thoughtful questions about her photography, seeming genuinely interested in her work rather than merely being polite. In return, Mia found herself curious about the man behind the business persona. "Why shipping?" she asked as they sat by the fire after dinner, each with a glass of wine. "Out of all the industries you could have conquered, why choose that one?" Something flickered in Warren's eyes, a memory perhaps, or some emotion she couldn't identify. "My father was a merchant sailor," he said after a pause. "He spent his life at the mercy of shipping companies that didn't value their crews. I started with one small cargo vessel and a determination to do better." "And now you own the largest private shipping fleet in the Northern Hemisphere," Mia remarked. "That's quite a journey." Warren swirled the wine in his glass, watching the firelight play through the ruby liquid. "The journey wasn't always honorable. I've made decisions I'm not proud of." The admission seemed to surprise even him. Mia sensed he wasn't a man who often acknowledged vulnerabilities. "We all have," she said softly. "The question is whether those decisions still define us." Warren looked up at her, his expression suddenly intense. "And what decisions define Mia Blackburn?" Mia took a sip of her wine before answering. "Walking away from a promising career in finance to chase eagles with a camera," she said with a small smile. "My parents still haven't forgiven me for abandoning my MBA for photography." "You were in finance." Warren asked, clearly surprised. Investment analysis, Mia confirmed. I was good at it too, but I was miserable. Spent my days in a cubicle analyzing market trends when all I wanted was to be outdoors. One day I just quit. Took my savings, bought professional camera gear, and never looked back. Brave, Warren commented. Or foolish, Mia countered. Depends on who you ask. No, Warren said with unexpected firmness. Brave. Most people never find the courage to pursue what truly matters to them. There was something in his tone that made Mia wonder if he was speaking from personal experience. Despite his success, was Warren Iverson truly pursuing what mattered to him? The quiet cabin in the woods, far from the corporate world he dominated, suggested perhaps not. As the evening wore on, Mia found herself drawn to the complexities of the man across from her. Warren Iverson was not simply the cold businessman portrayed in the media, nor was he merely the solitary figure seeking refuge in nature. He was both, and somehow neither a man of contradictions who seemed as surprised by their easy conversation as she was. When Mia finally retired to the guest room, wrapped in borrowed flannel pajamas that dwarfed her frame, she found herself thinking about the strange turn her day had taken. What had begun as a routine photography expedition had transformed into something entirely unexpected. As she drifted off to sleep, the last image in her mind was Warren's face as he'd pulled her from the ice, fierce, determined, and somehow vulnerable all at once. Morning arrived with pale winter sunlight filtering through the pine trees outside her window. Mia stretched, feeling the soreness in her muscles from yesterday's fall. She made her way to the bathroom and surveyed the damage, a few bruises on her hip and shoulder, but nothing serious. Her clothes, she discovered, had been washed and dried, folded neatly on a chair outside her door. The smell of coffee and something sweet led her to the kitchen, where Warren was already dressed and cooking. He looked up as she entered, his expression guarded once more, as if the easy companionship of the previous evening had been an aberration he wasn't sure how to navigate in the light of day. "Good morning," he said formally. "How did you sleep?" "Surprisingly well," Mia answered truthfully. "Thank you for the clothes, and for washing mine." Warren nodded, turning back to the stove where he was flipping pancakes. "I thought you might be hungry before you head back to town." The implication was clear. Their unusual interlude was ending. Mia felt a flicker of disappointment that surprised her. She barely knew this man, and yet there had been something in their evening together that felt significant, as if they'd stumbled upon a connection neither had been looking for. "Starving, actually," she said, settling onto a stool at the island. "I didn't realize nearly drowning would give me such an appetite." A small smile tugged at the corner of Warren's mouth, breaking through his reserved demeanor. "The body needs fuel to recover from trauma," he said, placing a plate of pancakes before her. "Even minor trauma." Mia took a bite and couldn't suppress a sound of appreciation. "These are delicious. Where does a shipping magnate learn to make pancakes like this?" "The same place he learns to recognize thin ice on a lake," Warren replied dryly. "Life." There was a story there, Mia was certain, but Warren didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. Instead, they ate in companionable silence, the morning light growing stronger outside the windows. "I should head back soon," Mia said reluctantly as she helped clear their plates. "My camera equipment is still in my car at the public access point, and my sister will start to worry if I'm not home by noon." Warren nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll drive you." The road will be clearer now that the sun is up. As they prepared to leave, Mia felt a strange reluctance. This unexpected interlude with Warren Iverson felt unfinished somehow, as if they were walking away from a conversation mid-sentence. But what more was there to say? They'd shared a strange circumstance, an evening of conversation, and now life would return to normal. He to his billionaire existence, she to her modest photography career. Warren's vehicle was a surprisingly practical four-wheel drive SUV, not the luxury sports car she might have expected. As they drove down the winding mountain road, the winter landscape spread out before them: snow-covered pines, frozen streams, and in the distance, the glittering expanse of the lake where they'd met. "Your camera equipment," Warren said suddenly. "What did you leave in your car?" "My best Nikon and a few lenses," Mia replied. "Why? Expensive equipment to leave overnight in a remote parking area," Mia shrugged. "It's insured. Besides, not many thieves are prowling around frozen lakes in December." Warren made a non-committal sound but said nothing more until they reached the small parking area where Mia's modest sedan waited, the only vehicle in sight. He pulled up beside it and shifted into park, the engine idling. An awkward silence fell between them. How did one say goodbye after such an unusual meeting? A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too familiar. "Thank you again," Mia said finally. "For the rescue, the hospitality, everything." Warren nodded, his hand still on the steering wheel. "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," Mia disagreed gently. "Not to me." Their eyes met, and for a moment Mia thought she saw something in Warren's gaze, a flicker of the connection she'd felt the night before, a reluctance that matched her own. "Be careful on the ice," he said finally, his voice low. "If you come back to photograph those eagles." It wasn't quite an invitation, but it wasn't a dismissal either. Mia smiled. "I will, thank you, Warren." The use of his first name seemed to surprise him. He nodded once, and Mia took that as her cue to exit. As she climbed into her own car and watched his SUV disappear back up the mountain road, she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were meant to cross again. Whether by chance or choice, she wasn't sure, but the certainty lingered as she drove back toward the city, her thoughts full of a billionaire who made pancakes in a cabin in the woods. Warren Iverson did not make a habit of thinking about strangers. In his experience, most people wanted something from him: his money, his influence, his connections. He had learned early in his career to keep others at arm's length, to evaluate each interaction for potential gain or threat. It was a cold way to live, perhaps, but it had served him well as he built his empire. So why, 3 days after the incident at the lake, was he still thinking about Mia Blackburn? She hadn't asked him for anything, hadn't seemed impressed by his wealth or status. If anything, she had treated him with a refreshing normality, as if pulling her from a frozen lake was simply what any decent person would do. Which, of course, it was. Warren frowned at the financial report on his desk, unable to focus on the quarterly projections his CFO had prepared. Instead, his mind kept drifting to Mia's smile as she talked about her photography, the passion in her voice when she described capturing the perfect image of a bald eagle in flight. "Mr. Iverson." His assistant's voice came through the intercom on his desk. "Your 2 o'clock is here." Warren pressed the response button. "Send them in." He stood as the door opened, expecting the representatives from the Norwegian shipping company he was considering acquiring. Instead, a familiar figure stepped into his office, camera bag slung over her shoulder, looking as surprised to see him as he was to see her. "Mia," he said, the name escaping before he could adopt his usual formal tone. "Warren," she replied, equally startled. I didn't know this was your office. I was told to meet with the head of corporate communications." Before Warren could respond, his assistant appeared behind Mia. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Iverson. Miss Blackburn is here for her 2 o'clock with Miss Reynolds, not with you." Warren recovered his composure quickly. "No apology necessary, Deanne. Please let Miss Reynolds know that Miss Blackburn has arrived, but I'd like a moment with her first." The assistant nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind her. Warren gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk. "Please sit down. This is an unexpected coincidence." Mia settled into the chair, setting her camera bag carefully beside her. "Very unexpected. I had no idea Iverson Shipping was the company that commissioned the wildlife photography series." Warren returned to his seat, studying her across the expanse of his mahogany desk. She looked different here in his corporate environment, still casual compared to his suit-clad executives, but more polished than she had been at the lake, dressed in tailored trousers and a simple blouse, her dark hair swept into a neat ponytail. "I wasn't aware we had commissioned such a series," he admitted. "Though I'm not surprised. We've been working to improve our environmental image." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Our PR department is quite good, even if the CEO isn't always informed of every initiative." "So you really didn't know I'd be here today?" Mia asked, looking skeptical. "I had no idea," Warren confirmed, "though I'm beginning to think coincidences are becoming our specialty." Mia smiled at that, and Warren was struck again by how her entire face transformed when she smiled open, genuine, without the calculation he was accustomed to seeing in his corporate world. "Well, if you didn't arrange this, then the universe has a strange sense of humor," she said. "Out of all the photographers in the city, your company hired me to capture wildlife images for your new sustainable shipping campaign. The universe, or perhaps my very perceptive head of communications," Warren mused. "Elaine Reynolds has an uncanny knack for finding exactly the right person for any project." A knock at the door interrupted them. Warren's assistant poked her head in. "Miss Reynolds is ready whenever Miss Blackburn is available." Warren nodded. "Thank you, Deanne." He turned back to Mia. "I won't keep you from your meeting. Elaine will brief you on the project details." Mia stood, collecting her camera bag. "It was a surprise seeing you again," she said, her tone suggesting she wasn't entirely displeased by the surprise. Warren found himself rising as well, moving around the desk to walk her to the door, a courtesy he rarely extended to business visitors. "Perhaps not our last surprise," he said, the words coming out before he could analyze them. Mia glanced up at him, a question in her eyes that Warren wasn't sure he could answer. What was he suggesting? He hardly knew himself. He only knew that he wasn't ready for this to be their final encounter. "I hope not," Mia replied softly, then seemed to catch herself. She straightened, shifting back into professional mode. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Iverson." "Warren," he corrected. "After pulling someone from a frozen lake, I think we're past formalities." A smile tugged at her lips. "Warren, then, I'll let you get back to your billion-dollar decisions." As she walked out of his office, Warren found himself standing there longer than necessary, watching the door that had closed behind her. What was happening to him? He'd built walls around himself for good reason over the years. One chance encounter with a woman who fell through ice shouldn't be enough to shake those foundations. And yet, as he returned to his desk and the financial reports that awaited his attention, Warren knew something had shifted. The Ice King, it seemed, was beginning to thaw. Mia followed the assistant down the hallway of Iverson Shipping's executive floor, trying to process the unexpected encounter with Warren. When she'd agreed to take on this corporate photography assignment, documenting wildlife along the company's shipping routes to emphasize their commitment to environmental protection, she'd had no idea she'd be working for Warren's company. The coincidence seemed too perfect to be truly random, and yet Warren's surprise had appeared genuine. Either he was a better actor than she'd given him credit for, or fate was playing an elaborate game with both of them. "Miss Reynolds is right through here," the assistant said, opening a door to a bright conference room overlooking the harbor. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes rose to greet her. "Miss Blackburn, I'm Elaine Reynolds. Thank you for coming in today." "Please call me Mia," she said, shaking the offered hand. "Mia, then," Elaine agreed with a warm smile. "I'm thrilled you accepted our offer. Your portfolio is exactly what we're looking for: authentic wildlife imagery that captures both the beauty and vulnerability of the ecosystems our ships navigate." As Elaine launched into a detailed explanation of the project, a series of photographs documenting marine life and coastal habitats along Iverson Shipping's northern routes, Mia tried to focus on the professional opportunity rather than the man whose office she just left. This was a significant commission that could elevate her career, regardless of her unexpected personal connection to the company's CEO. "We'll need you to travel to several locations over the next few months," Elaine was saying. "Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, possibly Scandinavia in the spring. All expenses paid, of course, plus your standard day rate." Mia's eyes widened. This was far more extensive than she'd initially understood. "That sounds incredible," she said honestly, "but also more involved than what was outlined in the initial brief." Elaine's expression turned apologetic. "Yes, I'm afraid the scope has expanded somewhat since our first contact. The CEO has taken a personal interest in the project." "Has he?" Mia asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Just this morning, actually," Elaine said, checking her tablet. "I received a note from Mr. Iverson requesting we expand the campaign to include all our northern routes, not just the Pacific ones. It's unusual for him to get involved in marketing details, but I'm not complaining. His support means a bigger budget." Mia absorbed this information, wondering what it meant. Had Warren made this decision before or after seeing her? And why did the answer matter so much to her? "Do you think you'd be available for this expanded scope?" Elaine asked. "We can be flexible with the timeline." The opportunity was too good to pass up, personal complications aside. "Yes," Mia said decisively. "I'd be honored to take on the project." "Excellent," Elaine beamed. "Let's go over the first locations and discuss what equipment you'll need." The meeting lasted over an hour, with Elaine outlining an ambitious schedule that would have Mia photographing in Alaska within 2 weeks. As they wrapped up, Elaine walked Mia toward the elevator. "One more thing," Elaine said as they waited. "Mr. Iverson has requested that you report directly to him on this project, rather than to my department as we'd originally planned." Mia blinked in surprise. "Directly to the CEO for a marketing project?" Elaine's expression was carefully neutral, though Mia thought she detected a hint of curiosity in the older woman's eyes. "As I said, he's taken a personal interest. It's unusual, but Mr. Iverson is known for being hands-on when something captures his attention." The elevator arrived and Mia stepped in, her mind racing. "I'll be in touch about the travel arrangements," she said, trying to sound professional despite her confusion. "We'll have everything set up by the end of the week," Elaine assured her. "And Mia, whatever impression you've made on Mr. Iverson, it must be significant. I've worked here for 12 years, and I've never seen him take such an interest in a project like this." Before Mia could formulate a response, the elevator doors closed, leaving her alone with her thoughts as she descended to the lobby. Warren had intervened in the project after seeing her, that much was clear. But why? Was this simply a case of a man used to getting what he wanted, pursuing a new interest? Or was there something more genuine behind his actions? As Mia exited the imposing Iverson shipping headquarters and stepped into the crisp winter air, She found herself wondering just what she'd gotten herself into. The assignment was a dream opportunity professionally, but the personal complications were unexpected. Warren Iverson was not a man to be taken lightly in business or, she suspected, in any other aspect of life. Her phone buzzed with a text as she reached her car. The number wasn't familiar, but the message made her breath catch. Dinner tonight. To discuss the project. W.I. Mia stared at the screen, her heart beating faster than it should for a simple business dinner invitation. There was nothing inappropriate about a client wanting to discuss a project, even if that client happened to be a billionaire who had recently saved her from a frozen lake. She typed her response carefully. "I'd be happy to discuss the project. When and where?" The reply came almost immediately. 7 p.m. I'll send a car. No restaurant name, no further details. Just the assumption that she would agree and that he would arrange everything. It was presumptuous, and yet Mia found herself smiling as she put her phone away. Warren Iverson might be used to controlling every situation, but he was about to discover that Mia Blackburn wasn't so easily managed. She sent another text. "No car needed. Just send the address." "I prefer to drive myself." There was a longer pause before his response. "As you wish. La Mason, 7 p.m. Reservation under my name." Independence established, Mia drove home to prepare for what promised to be an interesting evening. Whether this was truly about the photography project or something more personal remained to be seen. But either way, she was determined to maintain her equilibrium around the compelling billionaire who had so unexpectedly entered her life. La Maison was the kind of restaurant Mia rarely frequented, an exclusive French establishment where reservations were typically booked months in advance, and the menu contained no prices. As she handed her keys to the valet and smoothed the simple black dress she'd chosen for the evening, she reminded herself that this was a business dinner, nothing more. The maitre d' led her through the dimly lit restaurant to a secluded table in the back where Warren was already waiting. He rose as she approached, and Mia was struck again by his imposing presence. In his tailored suit, with his dark hair neatly combed and his sharp features highlighted by the soft lighting, he looked every inch the powerful billionaire the world knew him to be. "You found the place without difficulty?" he asked, as she settled into the chair the waiter held for her. "My car has GPS," Mia replied with a smile. "And contrary to what you might think, I do occasionally dine at nice restaurants." A flicker of amusement crossed Warren's face. "I made no assumptions about your dining habits." "Didn't you?" Mia challenged gently. "You seem to be making quite a few assumptions lately, like the assumption that I'd want to report directly to the CEO on a photography project." Warren had the grace to look slightly abashed, though he recovered quickly. "I prefer to be personally involved in projects that matter to me." "And when did this particular project start to matter to you?" Mia asked. "Before or after I accidentally walked into your office this afternoon?" Warren regarded her thoughtfully. "You're very direct." "I find it saves time," Mia replied, "especially when dining with busy billionaires." The corner of Warren's mouth twitched upward. "After," he admitted. "Though I was already thinking about you before that." His candor caught Mia off guard. She'd expected evasion or some business justification, not this simple acknowledgement of interest. Before she could formulate a response, the sommelier appeared at their table to discuss wine selections. Warren deferred to Mia's preference, another surprise that suggested this wasn't his usual approach to dining companions. Once they were alone again with glasses of a rich burgundy, Warren leaned forward slightly. "I apologize if my intervention in the project seemed presumptuous. It wasn't my intention to make you uncomfortable." "I'm not uncomfortable," Mia clarified. "Just confused. 3 days ago, we were strangers who happened to cross paths at a frozen lake. Now I'm having dinner with you and discussing a major photography assignment for your company." "It's a lot to process." Warren nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Life rarely follows predictable paths. In my experience, the most significant opportunities often arise from unexpected circumstances." "Is that what this is?" Mia asked. "An opportunity, isn't it?" Warren countered. "Professionally for you, certainly. As for the personal aspect," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I find myself intrigued by someone who walked away from a promising finance career to pursue their passion, regardless of the financial implications." "You make it sound more noble than it was," Mia said. "I was miserable in finance. Photography makes me happy. It wasn't a difficult choice." "But it was a brave one," Warren insisted. "Most people choose security over passion every time." "And which did you choose?" Mia asked, genuinely curious. "When you built your shipping empire, was it passion or security that drove you?" Warren considered the question as their appetizers arrived: delicate scallops for Mia, foie gras for Warren. "Both, initially," he said once the server had departed. "My father's experience gave me a passion for creating a better kind of shipping company, but after the early years—" He trailed off, his expression darkening slightly. "Business has a way of becoming about the win, about expansion for its own sake. The passion can get lost." "Is that what happened to you?" Mia asked softly. Warren met her gaze directly. "Until recently, I might not have recognized what was missing." The implication hung between them as they began their appetizers. Mia wasn't sure how to respond to such candor from a man reputed to be as closed off as Warren Iverson. What had she done to inspire this level of disclosure? And more importantly, what did it mean for whatever was developing between them? "Tell me about the eagles," Warren said suddenly, changing the subject. "The ones you were hoping to photograph when you ended up on my lake." Mia smiled, grateful for the shift to more comfortable territory. "There's a pair that nests in that area. I've been tracking them for about 2 years now. They're magnificent birds. There's something about the way they soar that captures both freedom and precision." As she described her work, showing Warren some images on her phone, their dinner progressed from appetizers to main courses: a perfectly cooked duck breast for Warren, sea bass for Mia. The conversation flowed more naturally than she would have expected, touching on everything from environmental conservation, a subject Warren was surprisingly knowledgeable about, to their favorite places in the city. They discovered a shared appreciation for the small Japanese garden hidden in the botanical park. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé, they agreed to share. Mia had almost forgotten that this had begun as a business dinner. There had been no discussion of the project details, no talk of schedules or deliverables. Instead, they had spent the evening getting to know each other as people, not as CEO and photographer. "You haven't asked me a single question about the assignment," Mia noted as she savored a bite of the soufflé. Warren smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually stern features. "Elaine is more than capable of handling the details. I was more interested in the person behind the camera." "And what have you learned?" Mia asked, surprised by her own boldness. Warren regarded her thoughtfully. "That Mia Blackburn is as intriguing as I suspected. Talented, principled, unimpressed by wealth or status." He paused, then added more softly, "And someone I'd like to know better, project or no project." The directness of his statement sent a flutter of anticipation through Mia. "Are you always this forthright?" "Almost never," Warren admitted. "I'm known for being guarded, as I'm sure you've gathered from whatever you've read about me." "The Ice King," Mia said with a small smile. "An apt nickname in many ways," Warren acknowledged, but perhaps not as accurate as it once was. Their eyes met across the table, and Mia felt a connection that went beyond their unusual first meeting or their professional arrangement. There was something about Warren Iverson that resonated with her, a complexity beneath the powerful exterior. A man who had perhaps lost touch with what truly mattered in his pursuit of success. "I should probably get home," Mia said reluctantly, aware that the restaurant had nearly emptied around them. "I have an early meeting tomorrow with a gallery owner." Warren nodded, signaling for the check. "Of course. Thank you for joining me tonight, Mia." "Thank you for the invitation," she replied, "though I'm still not entirely clear on what we accomplished in terms of the project." A smile played at the corners of Warren's mouth. Perhaps the purpose of the dinner evolved. As they walked out of the restaurant together, Mia was acutely aware of Warren's presence beside her, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way he naturally adjusted his pace to match hers. At the valet stand, they waited side by side in comfortable silence. "When do you leave for Alaska?" Warren asked as the valet brought Mia's car around. 2 weeks, she replied. "I'll be there for about 10 days, photographing marine wildlife along the southeastern coast." Warren nodded, his expression contemplative. "I have business interests in Anchorage that need attention. Perhaps our paths will cross again." Mia studied him, trying to determine if this was a casual observation or something more intentional. "Perhaps they will," she said finally, deciding not to press the issue. "Good night, Warren." "Good night, Mia," he replied, opening her car door for her. As she settled into the driver's seat, he leaned down slightly. "For what it's worth, I'm glad the ice broke that day." Before she could respond, he had stepped back, his expression once again the composed mask of the billionaire CEO. Mia drove away with his words echoing in her mind. Unsure exactly what had transpired over dinner, but certain of one thing: her life had taken an unexpected turn, and Warren Iverson was somehow at the center of it. The Alaskan coastline sprawled beneath Mia's chartered helicopter, a breathtaking panorama of glaciers meeting the steel-blue waters of the Pacific. She adjusted her camera settings, preparing to capture the moment when a pod of humpback whales, visible as dark shapes beneath the surface, would emerge for air. This was the kind of shot that justified every hardship of wildlife photography: the early mornings, the long waits in uncomfortable conditions, the uncertainty of whether the perfect moment would ever materialize. 2 o'clock, the pilot called through her headset. "They're coming up." Mia swung her lens toward the indicated position, just as the first massive head broke the surface, water cascading from its barnacle-encrusted skin. She fired off a rapid sequence of shots as more whales surfaced, their synchronized breathing creating plumes of mist that caught the morning light like crystalline sculptures. "Perfect," she murmured, reviewing the images on her camera's display. 1 week into her Alaskan assignment, and she already had material that exceeded her expectations. Elaine Reynolds would be thrilled with the results, and more importantly, these photographs would help highlight the delicate ecosystems that Iverson Shipping claimed to protect in their operations. As the helicopter banked toward shore, Mia's thoughts drifted to Warren, as they had frequently since their dinner 2 weeks ago. He hadn't contacted her again before she left for Alaska, leaving her uncertain about where they stood. Was he genuinely interested in her personally, or had she misinterpreted his attention? Perhaps the dinner had simply been his way of establishing a connection with a new contractor working on a project he deemed important. The helicopter touched down on a small landing pad near the harbor of Sitka, the picturesque town that was serving as Mia's base for this portion of the assignment. She thanked the pilot, gathered her equipment, and made her way toward the rustic cabin she'd rented, eager to download her images and begin the initial editing process. As she approached the cabin, she noticed a sleek black SUV parked nearby that hadn't been there when she left at dawn. Mia slowed her pace, suddenly alert. Sitka was generally safe, but a photographer with expensive equipment couldn't be too careful in remote locations. Her concerns evaporated when the driver's door opened and Warren Iverson stepped out, looking surprisingly casual in jeans and a heavy sweater beneath an open parka. For a moment, Mia thought she might be hallucinating the man she'd been thinking about all week, suddenly materialized in front of her Alaskan cabin. "Warren," she called, quickening her pace. "What are you doing here?" He turned at the sound of her voice, and the smile that spread across his usually serious face sent an unexpected warmth through Mia despite the chilly air. "I mentioned I had business in Alaska," he said as she reached him. "The meetings finished early, so I thought I'd see how the project was progressing." Mia raised an eyebrow, not entirely buying this explanation. "You flew to Sitka to check on a photography project. That's quite hands-on, even for a CEO." Warren had the grace to look slightly abashed. "The business meetings were real," he said. "But I'll admit, seeing you was a more significant motivation for extending my stay in Alaska." His honesty disarmed her. Mia had spent the past 2 weeks wondering if she'd imagined the connection between them, and here he was, having apparently flown to a remote Alaskan town specifically to see her. "Well, since you're here," she said, unlocking the cabin door, "you might as well come in. I was just about to review today's shots." The cabin was small but comfortable, with large windows overlooking the harbor and a stone fireplace that Mia had kept burning during the chilly Alaskan nights. Warren took in the space with an appreciative glance as Mia set down her camera bag and hung up her heavy coat. "How long have you been waiting?" she asked, suddenly realizing he might have been here for hours. "Not long," Warren assured her. "Your landlady told me you'd gone up in a helicopter this morning. She seemed quite impressed that you're photographing whales for Iverson shipping." Mia smiled as she connected her camera to her laptop. "Mrs. Peterson has been wonderful. She's lived here her whole life and knows all the best locations for wildlife sightings." She gestured for Warren to join her at the small dining table where her computer was set up. "Want to see what I captured today?" Warren settled into the chair beside her, close enough that Mia could feel the warmth radiating from him. As she scrolled through the morning's images, she was acutely aware of his proximity, and the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with the crisp outdoor air that clung to his clothes. "These are extraordinary," Warren said softly as she displayed the sequence of the surfacing whales. "You've captured something vital about them, not just their physical presence but their essence." Mia glanced at him, surprised by the insight. Most clients commented on technical aspects or marketing potential, not the spirit she tried to infuse in her wildlife photography. "That's exactly what I aim for," she said. "Anyone can take a picture of a whale. I want people to feel what it might be like to be that whale, the freedom, the connection to something ancient and powerful." Warren's eyes met hers, and for a moment neither spoke. There was an understanding in his gaze that Mia hadn't expected, as if he recognized something in her approach that resonated with him on a personal level. "Are you hungry?" she asked finally, breaking the moment. "I was planning to head into town for dinner. There's a local place that serves the best salmon you've ever tasted." "I'd like that," Warren said. "Though I should warn you, I've had excellent salmon in Norway that will be hard to beat." Mia laughed as she closed her laptop. "Prepare to have your standards reset, Mr. Iverson." The small restaurant was indeed as good as Mia had promised, a family-run establishment where the day's catch was served with minimal fuss but maximum flavor. They sat at a corner table, away from the curious glances of locals who seemed to sense that Warren wasn't a typical tourist. "So," Mia said as they enjoyed their meal, "are you going to tell me the real reason you're in Sitka? Beyond checking on the project and seeing me, that is." Warren considered her question, twirling his wine glass thoughtfully. "I'm evaluating a potential acquisition, a regional shipping company that specializes in the Alaska to Seattle route. Their environmental practices align with changes I've been implementing in Iverson shipping, changes inspired by your Ice Lake retreat." Mia asked, remembering their conversations at his cabin. "Partly," Warren admitted. "I've been reconsidering certain aspects of how we operate for some time. Meeting you accelerated the process." "Me?" Mia asked, surprised. "What could I have possibly influenced in your business decisions?" Warren's expression grew thoughtful. "You chose integrity over profit when you left finance for photography. It reminded me of principles I once held that may have gotten lost in the pursuit of expansion." He paused, then added more softly, "You made me question what success really means." The candor of his response caught Mia off guard. This wasn't the calculating businessman portrayed in the financial press. This was a man engaging in genuine self-reflection, and somehow her choices had played a role in that process. "That's quite a compliment," she said finally. "Though I'm not sure my bank account would agree with the success part." Warren smiled slightly. "Success isn't measured solely by financial statements, something I've been reminded of recently." As their dinner progressed, conversation flowed easily between them, touching on Warren's business philosophy, Mia's adventures in wildlife photography, and their shared concern for environmental conservation. By the time they finished their dessert, a local berry cobbler that Warren declared better than any he'd had in five-star restaurants, Mia felt as if she'd known him for years, rather than weeks. Outside, the clear Alaskan night revealed a canopy of stars more brilliant than any visible near the city. They walked slowly back toward Mia's cabin, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. "The aurora is supposed to be visible tonight," Mia said, glancing up at the dark sky. "I was hoping to get some photographs if it appears." Warren followed her gaze upward. "I've never seen the northern lights," he admitted, "despite all my travels to Scandinavia and Alaska." "Really?" Mia looked at him in surprise. "But you've been to these regions so many times for business." "Business trips rarely allow time for stargazing," Warren replied with a hint of regret. "Meetings, negotiations, hotels, airports, the rhythm of corporate travel isn't conducive to appreciating natural wonders." Mia made a spontaneous decision. "Stay," she said. "We can wait for the aurora together. I have excellent coffee and a decent bottle of whiskey to keep us warm while we wait." Warren hesitated, and for a moment Mia thought he might refuse. Then his expression softened. "I'd like that very much." Inside the cabin, Mia built up the fire while Warren poured 2 glasses of whiskey. They settled onto the small sofa facing the large window that overlooked the harbor and the mountains beyond, a comfortable silence falling between them as they watched the night sky. "Thank you," Warren said after a while. "For what?" Mia asked, turning to look at him. "For this." He gestured vaguely to encompass the cabin, the night, their situation. "For reminding me there are experiences worth pausing for." Mia studied his profile in the firelight, the strong jaw, the slight tension around his eyes that never fully disappeared, the contemplative set of his mouth. "You don't pause very often, do you?" Warren shook his head slightly. "Not in years. Perhaps not since I started Iverson shipping." "Why not?" Mia asked softly. Warren was quiet for so long that Mia thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost as if he were speaking to himself. When my father died, he had nothing to show for a lifetime of work except calloused hands and a small pension that barely covered my mother's needs. I swore I wouldn't end up the same way working for others who profited from my labor. Once I started building the company, there was always another goal, another acquisition, another market to conquer. He took a sip of his whiskey. Pausing felt like weakness, like losing momentum. "And now?" Mia asked. Warren turned to meet her gaze. "Now, I find myself questioning what all that momentum was for, if not to eventually arrive somewhere worth being." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep in Mia. Here was a man who had achieved everything society defined as success, yet was only now beginning to question whether he'd been pursuing the right goals all along. Before she could respond, a flicker of green light outside the window caught her attention. "Warren, look!" she exclaimed, setting down her glass and moving to the window. The aurora was beginning, tendrils of pale green light dancing across the northern sky, slowly intensifying into more vivid curtains of luminescence. Mia grabbed her camera from the table and quickly adjusted the settings for night photography. "Come on," she said, already pulling on her coat. "We need to get outside for the best view." Warren followed her onto the small deck behind the cabin, where the view of the sky was unobstructed by trees or buildings. Mia set up her tripod and began capturing long exposure shots of the spectacle, but between images, she found herself watching Warren's face more than the sky. His expression as he gazed upward was one of pure wonder, the guarded billionaire temporarily replaced by someone more open, more present. The green and purple lights reflected in his eyes as they intensified, the aurora now putting on a full display of cosmic magnificence. "It's incredible," Warren said softly, "like witnessing something not meant for human eyes." "That's exactly how it feels," Mia agreed, lowering her camera. "As if we're being allowed to glimpse something magical." Warren turned to look at her, the aurora still playing across the sky above them. In the otherworldly light, his features seemed softer, more accessible than she'd ever seen them. "Mia," he said quietly, her name almost a question on his lips. She stepped closer to him, drawn by something in his expression, a vulnerability, a question, a possibility. "Yes." Warren hesitated, then reached out slowly to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch whisper light against her cheek. "I didn't come to Alaska just to see the project progress." "I know," Mia whispered, her heart beating faster. Above them, the aurora pulsed in waves of green and violet, casting an ethereal glow over the moment as Warren leaned down and kissed her. His lips were warm despite the cold air, and Mia found herself responding with an eagerness that surprised her. She'd been attracted to him since their dinner, perhaps even since that first day at the frozen lake, but the reality of his kiss surpassed her imagination. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Warren kept his arms around her, as if unwilling to let the moment end. "I've been wanting to do that since I pulled you from the ice," he admitted, his voice husky. Mia smiled up at him, the aurora forgotten for the moment. "That long? Even when I was soaking wet and half frozen," Warren laughed softly, the sound warming her more than her heavy coat. "Even then? Though I prefer you unfrozen." They stood together on the deck, watching as the aurora continued its celestial dance across the Alaskan sky, Warren's arm around Mia's shoulders, her head resting against him. It was a perfect moment, unexpected, unplanned, and somehow more meaningful because of it. Eventually, the cold drove them back inside, where the fire had burned low. As Mia added another log, she found herself wondering what this development meant for them. Warren would return to his corporate world soon, and she had another week of photography ahead before returning to the city. Was this a vacation romance, a brief connection destined to fade once they returned to their normal lives? "What are you thinking?" Warren asked, coming to stand beside her at the fireplace. Mia decided on honesty. "I'm wondering what happens next, when we go back to reality." Warren considered her words, his expression thoughtful. "Reality is what we make it, isn't it? I've spent years creating a reality focused on business success. Perhaps it's time to create something more balanced." "And what would that balance include?" Mia asked, needing to understand his intentions. Warren reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. "I'd like it to include you if you're willing, not as a project photographer or a chance encounter, but as someone significant in my life." The sincerity in his voice touched Mia deeply. This wasn't a casual proposition or a billionaire's whim. Warren Iverson was offering something genuine, a chance to explore what was developing between them, to see where this unexpected connection might lead. "I'd like that," Mia said softly. "Though I should warn you, I'm still going to insist on driving myself places." Warren laughed, the sound warming the cabin as much as the fire. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Outside, the aurora continued its dance across the Alaskan sky, a celestial blessing on a relationship that had begun with broken ice and was now thawing something long frozen in both their hearts. The remaining days in Alaska passed in a blend of work and unexpected happiness for Mia. During the days, she continued her photography assignment, capturing the majestic wildlife and landscapes of the region, often with Warren accompanying her when his business commitments allowed. In the evenings, they explored their growing connection over dinners in local restaurants or quiet conversations by the fire in Mia's cabin. When it came time to return to the city, Mia found herself reluctant to leave the bubble they had created in Alaska. Reality awaited them: Warren's corporate responsibilities, her other photography commitments, and the inevitable scrutiny that would come when a billionaire CEO began dating a relatively unknown photographer. "You're quiet," Warren observed as his private jet prepared for takeoff from Sitka's small airport. Mia glanced out the window at the mountains she'd grown to love during her assignment. "Just thinking about what's waiting for us back home." Warren reached across the space between their leather seats to take her hand. "Having second thoughts, not about us," Mia assured him. "Just wondering how this works in practice. You run a global shipping empire. I spend weeks at a time in remote locations photographing wildlife." "Not exactly compatible lifestyles." Warren's expression grew thoughtful. "Compatible doesn't have to mean identical. Perhaps what makes this work is precisely that we bring different perspectives to each other's lives." Mia smiled, squeezing his hand. "When did you become so philosophical?" "Around the time I fell through the ice," Warren replied with a slight smile. "Metaphorically speaking." As the jet climbed into the clear blue sky, Mia reflected on the transformation she'd witnessed in Warren over the past weeks. The guarded businessman was still there. She'd observed him in several video conferences, commanding his executives with quiet authority, but alongside that persona was emerging a man capable of wonder, of self-reflection, of genuine connection. Upon returning to the city, they agreed to take things slowly, allowing their relationship to develop away from public scrutiny as much as possible. Warren respected Mia's insistence on maintaining her independence, never pressuring her to adapt to his lifestyle or expectations. Instead, he seemed to appreciate her self-sufficiency, her dedication to her work, and her unwillingness to be impressed by wealth alone. For her part, Mia discovered layers to Warren that contradicted his public image. The Ice King reputation stemmed partially from his business acumen. Certainly, but also from a deliberate wall he had built to protect himself in a world where people often valued him for his wealth rather than his character. Behind that wall was a man of surprising depth, intelligent, occasionally funny, and increasingly willing to question his own priorities. 3 months after their return from Alaska, Mia found herself putting the finishing touches on the Iverson shipping exhibition at one of the city's most prestigious galleries. The environmental photography project had expanded beyond its original scope, developing into a full showcase that highlighted both the beauty of the natural environments where Iverson ships operated and the company's new sustainability initiatives. "Everything looks perfect," Elaine Reynolds said, surveying the gallery with evident satisfaction. "The board is thrilled with how this has developed." "I'm glad," Mia replied, adjusting the lighting on a particularly striking image of orcas swimming alongside an Iverson ship that had diverted course to avoid disturbing their pod. "It's been a meaningful project." "More meaningful than any of us anticipated, I think," Elaine commented with a knowing smile. The head of communications had been too perceptive not to notice the changed dynamic between Mia and Warren, though neither had made their relationship public yet. Mia felt herself blushing slightly. "The environmental initiatives are significant. Indeed they are," Elaine agreed, mercifully not pushing further. "Oh, before I forget, Mr. Iverson asked me to give you this." She handed Mia a small envelope. "He said you'd understand." Curious, Mia opened the envelope after Elaine moved on to speak with the gallery owner. Inside was a simple card containing an address and a time 7 p.m. that evening written in Warren's distinctive handwriting. No explanation, no additional message. Mia smiled, tucking the card into her pocket. In the months they'd been together, she discovered Warren had a surprising romantic streak beneath his businesslike exterior. Occasionally, he arranged unexpected experiences: a private concert by her favorite pianist, a sunrise helicopter ride over the mountains, a picnic in a meadow accessible only by hiking through a forest Warren owned. Each gesture revealed his attentiveness to her preferences and his desire to share meaningful experiences rather than simply impress her with extravagance. That evening, Mia arrived at the address. Warren had provided a location in an upscale neighborhood she wasn't familiar with. To her surprise, it appeared to be a residential building rather than a restaurant or cultural venue. She checked the address again, confirming she was in the right place, before approaching the doorman. "I'm here to see Warren Iverson," she said, feeling slightly uncertain. The doorman nodded immediately. "Miss Blackburn, Mr. Iverson is expecting you, top floor." The private elevator required a key, which the doorman provided. As Mia ascended, she wondered what Warren had planned. They had discussed meeting for dinner after she finished at the gallery, but this clearly wasn't a restaurant. When the elevator doors opened, she found herself in a spacious foyer. Warren was waiting for her, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater rather than his usual business attire. "Right on time," he said, smiling as he leaned down to kiss her. "Come in." Mia followed him into what appeared to be a residential penthouse, an expansive space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the city and the harbor beyond. The interior was surprisingly warm and inviting: comfortable furniture, artwork that reflected actual taste rather than investment value, and a large fireplace that currently held a cheerful blaze. "Warren, what is this place?" Mia asked, taking in the surroundings. "My new home," he replied, watching her reaction closely. "Or at least it will be. I close on it next week." Mia turned to him in surprise. "You're moving. What about your house in the hills?" Warren's current residence was a modernist mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, architecturally impressive, but, as Mia had noted on her few visits, somewhat cold and impersonal. "I'm selling it," Warren said simply. "It never really felt like home, more like a status symbol that I thought I should want." He gestured around the penthouse. "This place has the view I love but feels more livable, more real." Mia moved to the windows, taking in the panorama of the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. "It's beautiful," she acknowledged. "But why the secret? Why not just tell me you were buying a new place?" Warren joined her at the window, his expression somewhat nervous, an emotion Mia rarely saw in him. "Because I wanted to ask your opinion first, before everything was finalized." "My opinion?" Mia asked, surprised. "About your home," Warren took a deep breath. "About our home. If you wanted it to be." Mia stared at him, processing his words. "Warren, are you asking me to move in with you?" He nodded, his expression a mixture of hope and vulnerability that tugged at her heart. "I know it might seem soon, and I understand if you're not ready. But these past months with you have shown me what's been missing in my life. When I'm with you, places feel like home in a way they never have before." The sincerity in his voice moved Mia deeply. This wasn't a casual suggestion or a convenient arrangement. This was Warren Iverson, the man who had built walls around himself for years, opening up his life completely. "There's a space that would make a perfect studio for you," he continued when she didn't immediately respond. "With northern light and room for all your equipment. And I know you value your independence. You could keep your apartment if you wanted. Use it when you need space, or for when you return from assignments." Mia placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating steadily beneath her palm. "You've thought about this a lot, haven't you?" "Every day since Alaska," Warren admitted. "Maybe since the moment I pulled you from that frozen lake." He covered her hand with his own. "I'm not asking you to change who you are or what you do. I'm just asking if we could build a home together, a real one, not just a house." Mia looked around the penthouse again, seeing it through new eyes, not as Warren's new residence, but as a potential home for both of them. A place where her wildlife photographs might hang alongside maritime paintings that reflected Warren's connection to the sea. Where they could end busy days together, sharing experiences and perspectives from their different worlds. "Yes," she said simply, turning back to him. "I'd like that very much." The relief and joy that spread across Warren's face made him look years younger. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her slightly off her feet in his enthusiasm. "Really? You're sure?" Mia laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I'm sure. Though I warn you, I come with a lot of camera equipment and irregular hours." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Warren replied, setting her down but keeping her close. "And I come with conference calls at strange hours and occasional brooding." "I've noticed," Mia teased. "Fortunately, I find your brooding rather attractive." Warren's expression grew more serious. "You've changed me, Mia, in ways I'm still discovering." "We've changed each other," she corrected gently. "That's how it should be." As they stood together, looking out over the city where their unlikely story had begun with a broken patch of ice, Mia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From a chance rescue to a professional collaboration to a deepening personal connection, each step had seemed both unexpected and somehow inevitable. The Ice King had indeed thawed, revealing a man capable of profound warmth and genuine vulnerability. And Mia, who had always valued her independence above all else, had discovered that the right connection could enhance rather than diminish her sense of self. Together, they were creating something neither had anticipated but both now recognized as essential: a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that had surprised them both with its intensity and depth. 6 months later, on a crisp December day, Mia stood at the edge of the frozen lake where their story had begun, camera in hand, as she photographed a pair of eagles soaring against the winter sky. Behind her, she heard the crunch of boots on snow and turned to find Warren approaching, two steaming travel mugs in his hands. "Hot chocolate," he said, handing her one of the mugs. "Best remedy for a cold day." Mia smiled, accepting the warm drink gratefully. "You remembered." "I remember everything about that day," Warren replied, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "It changed everything." They stood together, watching as the eagles performed an aerial dance against the pale blue sky. In the year since their first encounter, both their lives had transformed in ways neither could have predicted. Warren had restructured parts of Iverson shipping to prioritize environmental sustainability, even when it occasionally impacted the bottom line. The Ice King nickname had gradually been replaced in business circles by references to his innovative approach to ethical shipping practices. For Mia, the Iverson project had led to significant recognition in the photography world, with her images appearing in major environmental publications and a book deal in the works. She maintained her independence professionally, continuing to travel for assignments, but always returned to the home she now shared with Warren, a place that had become a true sanctuary for both of them. "Careful near the edge," Warren cautioned as Mia moved closer to the lake to adjust her angle for a photograph. "The ice might be thin." "Don't worry," Mia replied with a smile. "I've learned my lesson about frozen lakes." Warren's expression grew more serious as he joined her. "Actually, there's a reason I suggested we come here today, beyond the eagle photography." Mia lowered her camera, noting the unusual tension in his posture. "What is it?" Warren took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that still made her heart beat faster after all these months together. "This place marks the beginning of us, where everything changed for me." He set down his mug on a nearby rock, then reached into his pocket. "I wanted to be here when I asked you a question I've been thinking about for months." Mia's breath caught as Warren produced a small velvet box from his pocket. Despite the cold, warmth spread through her as he opened it to reveal a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds, set in platinum. "Mia Blackburn," Warren said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "You broke through ice I didn't even realize had formed around my heart. You've shown me what really matters in life, and every day with you feels like a gift I never expected to receive." He took her gloved hand in his. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears pricked at Mia's eyes as she looked from the beautiful ring to the man holding it, this complex, challenging, wonderful man who had captured her heart so unexpectedly. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Warren, I would love to marry you." With hands that trembled slightly, a rare display of nerves from a man known for his steadiness, Warren slipped the ring onto her finger over her glove, promising a proper fitting later. Then he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a warmth that defied the winter chills surrounding them. Above them, the eagles called, their cries echoing across the frozen landscape. Mia thought it fitting that these majestic birds should witness this moment, creatures that soared freely yet maintained lifelong pair bonds, much like the balance of independence and connection she and Warren had found together. "I love you," Warren murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," Mia replied, her heart full as she looked up at him. "My Ice King who isn't so icy after all." Warren laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet lake. "Only you would dare call me that to my face." "Someone has to keep you humble," Mia teased. "Even billionaires need perspective." As they walked back toward the cabin hand in hand, Mia reflected on the extraordinary journey they had shared. What had begun with a terrifying moment of broken ice had led to the breaking of barriers far more significant, the careful guards they had both constructed around their hearts for different reasons. Now, with a future together stretching before them like an untouched snowfield, Mia knew their story was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead. Certainly, two strong individuals with different worlds merging their lives never came without complications. But the foundation they had built was strong, a love based on mutual respect, shared values, and the rare gift of seeing each other clearly, flaws and all. For Warren Iverson, the billionaire who had once been known only for his business acumen and cold demeanor, life had transformed in ways he could never have anticipated when he spotted a woman falling through ice on his private lake. In saving Mia, he had ultimately saved himself from a life of isolation disguised as success. And for Mia Blackburn, the photographer who had always valued her independence above all else, finding love with Warren had not diminished her freedom but enhanced it, giving her a partner who supported her pursuits while sharing his own world with her. Together, they had discovered the most valuable truth of all, that sometimes it takes a moment of breaking to create something far stronger and more beautiful than what existed before.